And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Lei Mohr, who after the birth of her second child had an NDE where she experienced deep oneness. Lei, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's my honor.
Lei, let's start with the day that this NDE happened and go from there.
Okay. I had just had my second son, and the birth had been very painful, very difficult. He was turning flip-flops inside my stomach, and I don't blame the medical people at all. They did what they had to under very difficult circumstances, but they continued to have to reach up, physically reach up inside of me and turn him around so that the cords wouldn't get caught, so that everything would work the right way and he would come out the right way. And through that process, I got an infection, and I was, right after he was born, my temperature went up to 111 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 44 degrees Celsius. And I was in the hospital. When you're that hot, you don't move, you don't do anything, you just sit there. And as I was sitting on the hospital bed, I sat up. There's no feeling, there's no pain, there's no emotions. I just sat up. And then I turned around and looked back, and there's my body down there on the bed. And then I floated out of my body and up into a dark tunnel. This is pitch black. There is no light. There is absolutely nothing there, but it is the most warm, gentle, loving, accepting place I had ever been. And it was just pure bliss. And I'm floating through this tunnel thinking, this is pretty nice. Even if it is pitch black, it's just pretty nice because it feels so good. And then I get to something, and of course I can't see anything, so I can't tell you that it was really there. But I perceived a widening of a room, like a room, but I couldn't see anything. It just felt like it was wider. And I thought, okay, and it still had that wonderful bliss. And I just thought, okay, whatever. Now I'm here. And it appeared to me that I had stopped moving in this widened space. And then I perceived what I would perceive as a male voice, but I don't know that that's what it was. But it was a voice, and it asked me, "Do you want to come now?" And I realized instantly what I was being asked. And for just a second, I panicked, and I thought about my two kids, and I said, I can't. I have two boys to raise. And then I perceived just a very non-judgmental nod of a head, and I was going back down the tunnel. And I went back down the tunnel very fast and plopped back into my body, and the fever instantly broke. And I was out of the hospital the next day. And that's the end, sort of that particular experience. But my entire life, the next 40 years, would be basically several events that continued the near-death experience to its climax. So the second one, we fast forward many years, couple decades, and I'm working in a very high-stress job and not liking it very much at all. And I just, for no reason at all, one day woke up with, again, a very high fever. And I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't moving anywhere. I wasn't going to work for sure. And I was on the bed, and I was 3 days on this bed in this very high fever in the middle of summer when it's blazing hot outside, with every blanket, every piece of clothing, everything I could put on me, and I was still shivering. And as this was happening, I started getting these little messages that would come through, little voices. And it said, you know how easy it would be to step over that line? You know, you could step over that line. It'd be so easy just to step over that line. And I was not in a place to be thinking very much. And then, oh, you want me to make a choice? And I thought about it for a little while. And I tried to think about it. And finally I said, well, I suppose if I'm going to stay here, I should probably get something to drink. I haven't had anything to drink or eat in 3 days, and I probably should get something to drink. And so I rolled out of the bed, crawled along the floor, went to get a drink of water, and came back, and was finally made it back to work 4 weeks later. That's how long it took me just to be able to get back to a point where I was functional enough to go back to work. And then as soon as I got home or got back to work, they had mentioned they started talking about dengue fever, because I live in Hawaii, and they had found some cases of dengue fever. And I didn't ever get tested, but shortly thereafter, at that time I was a supervisor, and shortly thereafter, one of my teammates did get dengue and got tested, and he was gone for several weeks. When he came back, he was telling us about his experience, and it was exactly like mine. I told him, I said, that is exactly what I felt when I was gone for so long. Again, it was never tested, so I can't say for sure. But then we move on again, and we're going to move about 10 years later now. And I'm not working at that place anymore. The lesson of that one was that I was not to work in that kind of an environment anymore. And so I moved on, and I had worked with the people who were affected and lost homes during the 2018 eruption of Kilauea on the Lower East Rift Zone. I was what they call a calmer, and so I was the one who was talking to the people and helping them with whatever I could to help them get back to a place of normalcy, if possible. And as I was doing this, I really felt like something was a little different, kind of strange. And so I said, what's going on here? To whatever, or nothing, or whatever you want to call it. And the answer was, are you ready to transform? What am I going to say? No. So I said, I guess so. And so we continued on this path. And then a little bit later, I was supposed to go grocery shopping, and I let my husband get ready, and he was about 15 minutes maybe. And when he came back, I had a high fever, and I was going no more. And so I thought, just sat in the bed and didn't do anything. But as I thought about it, something had happened before that. This is now roughly, it's exactly late August 2019. And I was doing all sorts of work trying to get the community back together, having a lot of meetings and doing stuff. And I was at this one meeting before I got sick, and I couldn't open a soda can. My fingers just would not open the soda can. And I thought, what's going on here? So one of my friend who was sitting next to me said, here, let me do it. And she opened the soda can for me. Now that doesn't feel very good when your friend has to open a soda can for you, but okay, fine. So then I took a drink of it, and I, oh, this tastes kind of funny. And I didn't think too much about it. And I thought, oh, I feel kind of like I'm coming down with something, but we don't stop, we just keep going. And so I got through the meeting and got home. And 2 days later is when I came down with the next high fever. And that lasted for 3 days again. And on the third day, the fever kind of broke, but I was so weak. I could not move through the house. I could not, it took me months to be able to go to walk to the mailbox. And at this time, we didn't know it at the time, but later on, doctors would say that they thought it might have been early COVID. And so I get through that one, and I'm sitting on the couch because I can't do anything else. I can barely move. And all of a sudden, this feeling of extreme bliss and comfort and togetherness, and just everything you can imagine that would be oneness came over me. And I could see the colors more brightly, and I could see everything more clearly. I could smell it really clearly. Everything was just heightened and beautiful and completely unconditionally loving. And it was amazing. And it lasted for a couple of days, just being in this bliss. And I just didn't want to move. I didn't want to go anywhere. I just wanted to stay there and feel it. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I don't want this ever to end. And of course it did. And I thought, how do I get back to that? And that was where I really started delving into things. I thought, if I'm going to be this close to death this many times, maybe I should prepare for it. And so I started studying the work, of course, of Ram Dass, who is one of the preeminent people who worked on having a really nice death. And I went through everything that he was talking about. Now, he transitioned that December, but I had gotten so close to him by watching everything that he did, everything I could find of his, everything, that I knew that when he transitioned, he did not want people to feel bad. He didn't want people to feel grief. He wanted them to feel the joy that he felt when he was no longer in form and when he was in the true bliss. And I saw him that way. And he actually visited me. I was sitting on that same couch. The door was open. Yes, I understand it was December, but this is Hawaii. And I was looking out the door, and I saw someone walk by that appeared to be in a white robe and had long hair. And at first I didn't think anything of it. Wait a minute. All there is blank land and forest trees. There's not a path even over there. What is this? And then I realized who it was. And when I got the strength, I walked outside, and under the guava tree, there were a diamond shape of 4 guavas in December when there's no guavas ever anywhere. And there was 4 ripe guavas in the shape of a diamond. And I knew he'd left them for me. And that was, to me, a very pivotal moment toward me moving on. But I moved on, and then a few years later, as I was now helping people trying to work through their traumas and help them, I realized that I had a trauma I hadn't dealt with, and that was my very abusive mother, who almost killed me when I was 16, and actually did shoot my former sister-in-law, and was in the last 15 years of her life, she was in prison, and I hadn't seen her in any of that time. But those memories still needed to be healed. And I thought, how can I do that? And then a friend of mine said, I had a similar situation, and I was able to see everything that they did and everything that I perceived as being painful. as them loving me enough to give me the foundation to be who I am now. And I thought, that's amazing, but I can never do that. So I went on, and a couple months later, I was like, I still need to deal with this. So I said again to whatever, how do I deal with this? And a picture came into my head of a theater. Every seat is empty in the theater except the one that I'm sitting in, and it's all dark. And I'm just sitting there. And then I realized I'm not just the observer. I am the director. I am the actor. I, I am the writer. And I am the producer of this show. And then my life started going across the stage. And there's the people in my life, especially my mother, who was, like I said, she almost killed me at one point in time. And so I had a lot of very traumatic memories from her. And there she was, but she was just an actor in my play. I realized we had come together before we got here into the physical plane. We had made a pact or made an agreement that she would come in because she loved me so much and she wanted me to have that foundation so I could help other people. She would come in and do all those horrible things to me so that I could then be more understanding and have compassion for the people that I was going to help. And that scene lifted everything off of me into complete joy. And I could now live free of that. And then just a couple months later, I'm going along and helping people and being very joyous and happy. And for no reason at all, I woke up one morning and I'm just like jittery, like I've had way too much coffee, and it's just really painful, and it really is hurting. Not physically hurting, but it's just like, and I have no understanding of what's going on. I can't concentrate on anything. I've tried every method. I can't meditate. Tea isn't working. A bath isn't working. Nothing is working. And this lasted for 3 days. And then on the third day, I woke up and I was like in such freedom and bliss and joy and just so much beauty. And I'm just floating. And my brother, who was the only contact, because it is his former wife who had been the one who was killed. So that was the only contact the prison had. And he called me and he said, I need to tell you our mother died this morning. And I said, oh? And I told him what I had been experiencing for the last 3 days. And he said, they called me a few days ago and they told me she was in rough shape and she wasn't expected to make it. And I realized at that moment that I had shared her last times with her, and the bliss that I was feeling was what she was now feeling. And at that moment, our relationship was solidified and has been better ever since than it was when she was informed. And that's my near-death experience.
Lei, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. If we go back to the first one, you heard this voice. Whose voice do you think that was?
I have heard him many times throughout my life. Whenever I ask these deep questions, I don't know who it is. I don't have a name for it. I call him the voice. And I have ever since called him the voice.
What other deep questions do you ask?
One time I was in a relationship and I didn't know if it was not a good relationship. I was with a narcissist and I didn't want to, it was horrible. And so I asked, do I stay or do I go? And the voice says, he is your first client. At the time, I was still working on my master's degree and I was teaching college level. I was not taking clients of any sort or kind and had no thought of doing so. But he was my first client.
Well, you heard voices again and again. Was it the same voice throughout or different beings?
I perceive it as being the same voice, but I think that's because I recognized it from the time that I was, 21 years old. Um, I I know that I have a lot of different supporters out there. In fact, I now am able to channel a group called the Wisdom Keepers of Lost Civilizations. They want to help us all avoid their fate and to do better and be the society and that humanity should go on and be what it should be or could be.
After any of your experiences, did you gain any new abilities that you didn't have prior?
I would say yes. After the first one, first of all, I felt extremely empowered. I knew that I had a reason for being here, but people would come to me. They would just come to me with I didn't even have to know these people or not very well. And they would come to me with their deepest issues. So that because they felt the calming presence, which I would later use with the people in the volcano situation. But I had this calming presence, which I used to help them, but it also got me promoted to management in every job I ever had after that. But as I progressed through this very long NDE, I got closer and closer to having my full faculties that I had been given. But I didn't, I fought it because I came from a very staunch religious family and was told that all of those kinds of things would take me to hell. And if hell was worse than my family, because my family was supposed to be perfect, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I pushed everything down and I ignored it, even though it was all there. And I can see it now. It was always all there. I could see things, I could hear things, I could, especially, upon any time I meet a person, whether it's physically or over technology, I can instantly feel their emotional energy. I know where they're coming from. And so, yeah, I got lots of interesting abilities because of these.
For those out there who don't know who Ram Dass is, can you share a little bit about him?
Ram Dass started his journey back in the 1960s. He was one of the early pioneers of bringing spirituality to America. And he started with Timothy Leary and in their experiments with LSD. And that's how he got more spiritual. But he became a great teacher of all things about oneness and how to especially how to die a good death. He learned under Neem Karoli Baba for years. He went to India and studied under Neem Karoli Baba and meditated and was just a huge presence with a most gentle presence, on like a stage presence. He was just so welcoming and such a good teacher, especially for all of us who were starting our journeys, because he had started the whole movement.
At this point in your life, do you fear death at all?
None, not at all. In fact, when it's my time to go, and I now believe we can actually choose that time, I'm ready to go. But I also have learned since then that the way that we think about death and the way that we all think it must be painful and it must be hard and it must be a long process, this may all not be true. And it might very easily be possible, as some of the ascended masters who have been on the planet have already done, to leave this form and let the energy release without pain, without suffering, and very quickly. And so, no, I have no fear of death at all.
If you had a friend that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what kind of advice would you give?
I actually have helped many people with this particular issue. And grieving, as in the society that we have right now, is necessary for most people. And it is part of a process. We don't realize that that grieving is us trying to hold on to what we had, but they are not gone. However, what I would tell them, and it's a very compassionate way of being, is that whatever grieving you are going through is the right way to do it for you. And no one can change that for you. It's your own process. Go through it, feel it, do whatever is necessary for your well-being to handle it in whatever way is yours.
Has the memories of these experiences faded over time?
No. I recall them as clearly as I do as when they were happening. However, when I was still in my forgetting stage, I forgot all of them, or I forgot the early ones anyway, for years. I didn't admit to them. I didn't tell anybody about them. I didn't even let on that they had existed until the forces that woke me up and said, yeah, it's time for you to remember these things.
Now, you're the author of several books.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us the titles and what they're about?
The ones that people seem most interested these days are the most recent two, one of which is Dream It, See It, Live It, which is about the process of getting or manifesting your dreams. I don't like the word manifest. I think it's overused now, but there is a process by which we can acquire and have our dreams. And this one is not what people have been told it is. This is more like the steps of healing yourself from the idea that you cannot have it, so that now you can. It's written, and the last two books are written for younger audiences that are very busy and used to information at the touch of a button. So they're written in, this one is written in small snippets, like one-page snippets, and it's less than 100 pages long.
What have you been able to manifest in your life?
I moved to Hawaii, but the thing is, when I moved to Hawaii, I moved here with a minimum wage job, full-time minimum wage job, which by itself is amazing because people don't do that. But I also have a house and a yard that is completely paid for. We figured out how to do that. And I live in Hawaii. I was on the mainland, and I wanted very much to be back in Hawaii where I was born. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen. I have also helped other people manifest things, like one man who was working in basically a factory or a manufacturing plant and was very depressed because it wasn't what he was supposed to do. We helped him get to being a professional pilot. That's a lot of manifesting. Those are just a couple of stories.
Well, can you give us at least a couple tips on how to do it?
Yeah. Dream it, see it, live it. The first part is to make it real in your mind, because the subconscious cannot differentiate between reality as we see it and reality as we make it in our mind. So part of it is, a lot of it is making it real in your real in your mind, like every sense possible. Make it real in your mind. and know that it is real. And the rest of the process is much longer than that, but that's a big start of it, is to make it real in your mind.
What about your other book?
The other one is called There Was No Fear, and it goes more in depth about this entire process of my very long NDE. And it puts out a lot of the tips about things that I learned from each of them and tools that I gained along the way that are accessible to everyone out there, so that they also can heal their traumas and move on to having a better, more fulfilling life.
What would you think is the most important message from all your NDEs that people need to hear?
That there is no death, that when we leave this body, when we drop this body, if you will, the body may return to the earth, but there is no death. We, who we really are, our true selves, is energy, and energy cannot be killed, and it will last forever. It was never created. It wasn't created as such. We are created from the creative source, and we are pieces of that creative source. But that creative energy source never dies.
Are you working on any more books?
The last two books actually were not written by me, but rather by the Wisdom Keepers. And the process of that is usually somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning, they wake me up and say, "You're going to write a book." And I say, "I am?" "Yeah, you're going to write a book and you're going to do it right now." "I am. Can it wait?" "No, now." "Oh, fine. Okay." And they will start writing the book. The last two have been written in a very short amount of time, and I would go back afterwards and say, "Oh, I think I forgot this part." Oh, I'm looking through the manuscript. "Oh, it's right there. Look at there." And that's how I know I'm not writing it.
Would you say that these wisdom keepers are your guides or your higher self?
I believe probably all of the above. Guides, all of the entities out there that are supporting us, and there are multitudes of them. They're all part of the same whole, and what they want for all of us is for us to regain our oneness of ourselves and of knowing that everyone else is the same oneness. So does it matter if you call them angels or guides or any other number of names? I don't think so. And yes, our inner self, our inner knowing, all of that is all part of the same oneness.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that? And if so, how can they contact you?
Absolutely, I'm open to that. I love helping people in whatever, serving people in whatever way I can. My podcast or my website is handletheshift, SHIFT.com. And there you can find links to my schedule. You can find links to my books. You can find my email address if you need to write to me that way. And I'm open to all of these things. There is on there, if you want to have a session with me, you can get the first session free. And that one is called Clear Way Forward. And there is a button for it on the website. And that's the easiest way. You can also see me on Facebook and see the kinds of things that I post. It is just my name, Lei Mohr, and on Facebook, and other links as well, like LinkedIn and such. But Facebook is the one that most people use, and my website.
This may seem way out there, but I'm going to ask it anyways. After any of your experiences, have you started having UFO contact?
I actually, not necessarily UFO, but there's a whole bunch of beings that live in the tree out here.
Really? Like multi-dimensional beings?
Like
or monkeys,
interplanetary
since
beings.
you live in Hawaii.
Interplanetary. I did the meditation to be able to invite them in. Of course, I wanted them to be, I wanted it to be, if they did so, completely safe for everyone, for them, for me, for everything. And so they appeared in that tree.
Are they still there, or are they left?
There's several of them, and some of them come and go. One of them is there all the time. He's up there smiling right now.
What does he look like? What does he look like?
He looks like, well, of course, he's part of the tree, kind of. He's made of the tree. So he's like a face in the tree that was never there before. And his expressions change depending on what he wants me to know. I think it's a he. And what is best for everybody. You know, I can see it. I don't know if other people can see it, but he's there.
It kind of sounds like what some people call elementals.
In this case, that is the safest way he could be here, where some people who don't necessarily, how can I say this and be gentle about it? There are people who think that they might be out there to harm us, and they're not. They're here to help us. But that's the safest way for him to be there.
Well, Lei, before we finish up, can you give us one last positive message?
We are all here to learn, to experience, and to especially to experience joy and love. And the idea that we have all this pain is a perception. And if we do the work that is necessary to heal ourselves, we truly can live in joy and love and bliss. And that, I believe, is where the world is going to in this next phase, after that, where the world is changing to go through and to get to that. And I really look forward to it. And as much as this process is painful for a lot of people, I see it as being what needs to happen so that we can get to that blissful way of living.
Lei, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me. It's been my honor.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.